they get a special report, instead of returning the money or whatever. The government is responsible to provide, compensation or coverage of services in, a number of areas. And there is no, limit to what the services, that they have to cover. It's based on the individual child's needs. Everyone is different, and that's how that unit operated. It was based on the child's needs, and we explained that to families when they came in. Just because you see a fence going up in this person's yard and you want to fence it, there has to be justification. Example of the fence, we have young children that have multiple disabilities, and they like to run, and they'll run on the roads nearby. So we justify a fence for the families to keep them in the yard. Roofing, leaks in homes. We branched out beyond the educational needs and the health needs to basic needs. And Jordan's principle was funding families through our unit for renovations, for tearing up old bathrooms, getting new furniture for the children in the home. We had to develop a trust. You're talking about trust. That unit had to develop a trust with those families. Many were hesitant to come forward, even though they're the families that Jordan's principle was meant to help. They were very quiet because they didn't want to tell people in authority or whatever the conditions of their home. They were afraid that the child welfare people would come into the home and take the children away because they didn't have running water, and they didn't have proper electrical, or there was mold all through the home. And we approached each family and said, okay, what do you need? Is your house leaking like everybody else's? And we said, yeah, okay. Well, then when the roofs leak, you must have mold in the home. Do you have black mold in the corner? Yes, we do. Okay, well, that's a health and safety. We'll fix that. We were branching out to help in so many ways. So the navigators that were working with me were a phenomenal group of ladies. They all have qualifications in the social service area. They can write letters with their educational certificate. They can do the support letters. They walked some of the families that needed walking through. This is not enabling a family. You're not enabling a family when the family do not know what to do. So you focus them on their needs. And, those navigators may have taken maybe 1 hour, 2 hours with one family that was well organized and had everything, but may have taken days with another family that didn't know where to start. And we told them, we're going to take the stress off your shoulders. We're going to help you. And a lot of the times they say to me, no one ever listened to us before. And that was really disheartening. That was really sad. Those words saddened me because I thought, these are our people. Why are we not helping them? So when the program was terminated, there was no thought to transitioning all these files or these families to anyone who had this. And I'm not saying, we have a lot of educated people now. We have social workers, we have PSWs, we have a lot of people that have the skills. But you can't just put a 4-page application on a desk at somebody's office and say, you're applying for joint residence over here, fill this out. That doesn't mean anything. You have to get their story before you get to the point of helping them with what their needs are. It's very intense, and we took our cues from the families. The families, who would you like to work with? I have these 3 navigators here. Is there anyone in particular? Oh, no, I'll work with anyone. They drove our job. They told us what they wanted. We never talked down to them and said, well, you're gonna do this, and you're gonna go see that person, and you're not, and don't come back until you have this page filled out. We didn't do that. We listened to their story and we helped them draft their application. It was a lot of work, but there was so much enrichment, there was so much pleasure and excitement to get these families major renovations in their home, new furniture for their children, clothing, educational devices, just the sky was the limit. And I have worked with a lot of great people, but I can tell you, those ladies I've worked with by far were the best employees I've ever had. Didn't have to supervise them, they knew their job, they were courteous to the families, they knew all the contacts and how to get invoices or quotes on different things. And the one gal was even writing appeals. She just started writing appeals. Prior to that, I did the appeals. And the appeals I wrote were all, the denials were overturned and the family got the products that they needed. When we were terminated, I had a file full of appeals to be written. No one cared about that. So these families didn't get the products they needed. No one cared about who's going to help these families when they terminated that service. No one came to me for an idea, a plan. Okay, you're going to terminate our contracts, fine. What are you going to do with these families? That was never asked of me. And when they terminated the program, they told me that coordinator's job and 2 navigators positions would be posted. Mind you, this is from the couple of the individuals that are no longer with us. And the one lady had the nerve to tell me that, oh, you must have misunderstood. I didn't say that. But anyway, that's aside from the fact. It was just the lack of, they didn't care about these families and who was going to help them. They just wanted the probably me terminated because I questioned everything that was being told to me. But anyway, I would recommend, and I know there's probably a hiring process, but if we're looking at this as a term contract, 2 individuals particularly slide into those positions as if they never left and pick up on those files of those children because they created them and follow up on the products that the child needs or the repairs that need to be done to homes. I was at the point where I was going to buddy up with the housing to get faster service. I know we could get approvals on applications for renovations, but the government was taking 12 to 14 weeks or months to come up with approvals for the applications. When they committed to a 48-hour window for most 7 days. That has never happened. It was only through intense phone calls that we got some emergency help, and those were for suicide, children, young people threatening suicide and getting the mental care that they needed. There was much more than just filling out an application. And I felt bad when they terminated that program because I had promised these families that we would help them. So I couldn't help them as a Jordan's principal coordinator, but I can certainly push it through as an elected and councillor. So those are the, what I was recommending is that the program be reinstated. And ideally with the two navigators that were there, because there wouldn't be any training or whatever. I mean, no learning curve, they could jump right into the position. They're hard workers. One gal was doing, she could do 5 or more applications in a week, thorough applications, and her success rate was very high. And she's the one that could also write good appeal letters. She wrote an appeal shortly before COVID, her first appeal letter, and she got the denial turned into an approval. So she can do appeal letters, she can do whatever, as well as work with the families. So there was always an issue with the salary range. And I don't know why our director of finance and all these directors were so cheap on giving out people who had qualifications to do a job. They were making just a few dollars over minimum wage. And they had never raised the issue with me, but if they were brought back, I would recommend a higher rate of pay for them because they're really valuable employees. And then the other big part of this, Jordan's principle, is that all these expenses that program incurred or cost are reimbursable by the government through Jordan's principle. And no one followed up on that, no matter how many times I brought it up. There's also another issue of bridge funding. The band set aside 20 to 50,000, I'm not sure what amount, James, for bridge funding. And what bridge funding was, when the application was approved by Jordan's principal, it took the government a long time for the funding to flow or for the products or whatever. So in emergent situations, the band provided that funding so that that child could get that service or product. That bridge funding has never been replenished by Jordan's principal and just requires an application to get reimbursed, and that was never done. So you have maybe $30,000 sitting there that should be applied for. And I don't know what the program costs, 200,000 or whatever, I'm not sure. Because as you know, we didn't get any financial reports on. Plus I didn't have a budget. And I asked where our budget was. No one seemed to care that we didn't have a budget. They said, oh, you've got lots of money. So there has to be a proper budget and cost. And really, somebody really needs to look at getting reimbursement. We're looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars here. That's reimbursable by the government for Jordan's principal. We can go back to 2016 and all those dollars that the band paid out to children, 0 to 17, whether it's Casino Rama or whatever, braces or whatever, anything back to 2016 where a child would have qualified for Jordan's principal can be applied for as a reimbursement back to the band. And no one seems to care about that. So my recommendation is to bring back the 2 individuals that were working last. One I know would be interested, the other I don't know if that person would be interested.
Okay, thank you for your briefing note. I have a motion to acknowledge the briefing note and presentation by Marcia. Moved by Cody, second please. Second by Lyle, all those in favor? Carried. Now, breaking your briefing note into two sections. One, dealing with the reinstatement of the Jordan's principle. Can I have a motion to the effect that?
So before you start, so we do have group funding from Jordan's principle now for a very similar unit. The name of the unit is No Wrong Door. Things have improved from their end somewhat because I talked to them and I said, how are we supposed to accomplish some of these things when we waited months and months in the past for decisions? And the answer was they had no staff back then, and now they do, so they have a 3 to 6 week turnaround. I still find them a very difficult ministry to deal with. But we have funding for this year. We applied for 3 years of group funding for No Wrong Door. They gave us partial approval for this year, and they do seem fairly amenable. It looks like what we'll be able to do is put another 1-year application and keep the unit running into next year. So we're ready to recruit the coordinator right away and then fill the other positions in January, which we have expectation that unit will stay on the additional money. I can work with you to make sure those individuals, if they're interested, they know about the postings and that sort of thing. And definitely work with you as we get that.
I guess my question would be, why did we, dismantle Jordan's principle and all of a sudden resurrect this No Wrong Door? What's the sleight of hand here? What's the difference?
I think the bigger difference is Jordan's principles, their internal mandate says they can't fund a program. So if we say we're going to fund a program called Jordan's principle with no end date, we'll say, well, that's ineligible. So No Wrong Door has a goal of, in addition to providing that kind of support to families, building the capacity within our programs so that we can support applications, but it's supposed to be a multi-year process. So right now they seem supportive of us going year by year. And I think an important piece of No Wrong Door, which in my opinion wasn't emphasized enough, and I'm already talking to the local line manager to put more emphasis on this, but that's data management. It's easy to ignore, but what we need for these Jordan principal applications is to be able to support the fact that, because the government looks at it as a funding source of last resort. So in the application, you do have to document that you attempted to access funding through other programs. And we want a solution in place that makes that very easy to do.
I guess my supplemental, to that, and this would prevent us from pursuing a Jordan's principle program then for the First Nation?
Well, that
I'm trying to make a distinction.
Yeah.
So the target group.
So what we can do is get No Wrong Door in place. I think it'll look very similar, and if we continue to apply for funding, it'll probably look similar for the next 3 years or so.
Okay, let me stop you there. Is it going to use Jordan principle money?
It would. So if we said we want Jordan's principle with no end date, we'd like to be using funds for that.
Marcia?
And why are we listening to the government? This was a special initiative. This was a court-ordered initiative. The government lost in court, and the government has to pay for these services. Why are they saying you exhaust your other resources before you access Jordan's principle? That isn't what the court order says. It's very clear what the government's responsibility is. And we have to keep coming. This is your responsibility. This is what you will do for our children. These are the needs of our children.
What might be helpful for me is if you could assist me in these conversations with either the bureaucracy. It's an interesting structure right now where the assistant deputy ministers of the appeal process. I know that they have the committee, a
I would love to tell the government what the, their job is, their responsibility in relation to this, Jordan's principle. It's very clear.
And I guess the problem I have, I guess, in terms of where I'm at, I'm totally unaware, I guess, of the rationale, I guess, behind this no long proposal. As it sits now, right now in front of me, I guess, in terms of this briefing, this is news to me. And I don't know how, I guess, brief the rest of the council is, I guess, in this proposition here, in terms of what it's trying to do, in view of our previous application and utilization. Why are we, I'm still wrestling with the question, why are we using this to replace Jordan's principle?
And what was explained to me was when council put Jordan's principle in place,
Yeah.
it was it was going to be supported by the band until there was successful application for no longer. That's what was, how it was explained.
I got Neil then Ron.
So during the last term of council, I sat and attended the Independent First Nation quarterly meetings. At those meetings, they talk about IFN, and we talked about other Independent First Nations about applications and the process. IFN had a special, it seemed, organized system and procedures on how to apply and how to go through that. So the health director, the IFN health director, Lydia Jones, would come down her and her team to talk to our navigators on how to get the application process going here, and would help with those things. The money you talked about, the 50,000, was so that our First Nation could quickly expedite some things that needed to be with this $50,000, kind of like a quick turnaround. So if somebody needed a bed, they could pay out that amount. Certain things over a certain amount had to go through a different approval process. But what was supposed to happen is our finance would then send for reimbursement to replenish the 50,000. It would be continuous. And at one point, I heard that wasn't doing that very well. So Lydia would come down and she would make these updates about the Jordan's principle to us. We had more of a pulse and information about that and what other First Nations are applying for and have been successful in applying for. And we had a lot more support. So that support that we're looking for right now could come from the Independent First Nation. At the end of our term, there was discussion about multiple standing back from the IFN table at quarterly meetings. I'm not sure about the discussion that went further on that, but that was something that the chief was talking about. Amy probably would have had that information as well, because some councillors weren't understanding or feeling that the IFN would have needed at these tables. And when I attended, there was quite a bit of things that we had a pulse on. A lot of them were program related. One of them was, one is the Aboriginal Healing and Awareness Project, the Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women, and then the Health and Babies Healthy Children program that gets funded at the health center. All of those are connected and through IFN, our independent group. They're not a PTO, but they're a group that meets together to network and help each other. And there is a director, Diane, yeah. So Diane would oversee it and coordinate these groups. We also had the independent First Nations youth group that would come under there as well. We had two designates that sat on there. So that may be something, and I'll follow you right my last quarterly agenda for follow-up, to see where that goes, but, just as well, I don't know where the one door, what is it called?
No,
No, no, or is that a local initiative or is that a government initiative?
it's a local.
Okay, so,
That's, yeah, we call that proposal, no wrong door.
okay, so there is proposal that was submitted before on that how many and people paid through, community care, how is a couple of those workers? And that's how we also have other navigators paid through that funding that was applied, and that came through the special needs action department. This is not prior to that. So all of this goes back to that probably proposal that they wanted to do, and again, there's a direct way to access George's principal, but if you want to go through this around door, again, it's kind of a micromanaging and placing those funding differently. I think for programs, George's principal, though, for individuals, I think should still continue and go forward.
Sounds to me that I have finished an act like travel council.
There you go. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Try to provide services.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mike. So, just to fast forward, a word I would call no known part was SNAP. And I was one of the original portfolio counselors included in that council, Charles. But what we try to do is get all the programs that service kids with disabilities from 0 to 5 to elementary school and up. And so we were tracking those children, and I believe there was like 60-some children with severe or disabilities, about 100 something. We projected, I think, double that within 10 years. Anyhow, so we did try to keep getting all the inclusion of all the different things and where the gaps in services were for the different programs that service to families and children. So most of them were with disabilities. Move fast forward, they used that proposal to get the SNAP or the George's principal money through the home and community care. That was just a slice of it, the rest of it, or whatever, but it was a bigger thing, and Anika Altman is the one that did that. We hired her. So that being said was, when we did the George principle and we found out, like I said, a counselor, so I don't know if it was moving before that, but what we found out, we just thought it was for special needs children, and then found out it was for children of all sorts of lower income and so on and so forth. First Nation getting paid. There was new funding. So with that, it was like a new breath of fresh air, and so they said all the money, if we could bring our receipts, we'd get all of that back, and we're calculating, I think, $1 million something. I don't know if that ever came to be, but it was a good chunk of money. And so, anyways, that happened, and then we wanted to, make this thing happen more to help parents and families, because there was only one person at home community care that was doing basically the Jordan's principal proposals, and she retired. So we said, well, we want to get all of this, all these families help. How can we do this? And so that's when we established Jordan's principle, and we just called it that at that time. We could have called it a number of different things, but we just called it Jordan's principle for the simple fact it was the easiest thing to identify, and that's where we had, because we knew what that would do. Some of us probably weren't aware of the legislation wording, meaning that if we use George's principle, we had to use open source funding. We did for a while, but they would pay us such as Neil was saying. But we wanted to do our own because the IFM was taking over, and it was taking such a long time, and the appeals process. And so we wanted our own George's principle, our own program, our own service, to have our people to be able to come directly to our people and be approved or whatever, or assisted so that they would get their monies in an expedient manner. Because the longer you wait, things happen, children that have needs and other things slip by to the wayside, and families get frustrated. And the big word at the time was navigators for all of these things. So we thought if we hired they said, navigator, we said, we got a lot of people. We have 5,000 possible people, so we said we needed 3 or 4 navigators to help what we could, because they were so backlogged. And then we didn't know how long, we said we agreed, I believe, till June of 2019 or 2020. It might have been the spring, but I know we did one, and then we had to go back because we knew the need was there, and then it ended. And I don't know if we just couldn't carry it over or what, but there was a gap, and then the next thing you know, it was done with the program. And then someone moved back over to home care, there was still somebody doing it over there. But there's a need, and I think none of us wanted to end, but I know we did put that proposal in for to have our own program, our own deliverable program to help our own people.
I guess my question would be, what's to prevent us from having both?
Well, I believe, and I don't know, maybe Neil remembers, because I wasn't part of that group, I know possibly you and Wayne or Sharon were part of that, and the chief to try to get that, I believe, the former director, but I'm not sure. You guys are trying to meet with ministries or so on and so forth, for the Georgia principal funders and other things, so that we would have a direct line to that.
Okay, James.
And the only piece I'll add, I know Sharon Coyle sent a letter to IFM severing the relationship for her. So that would be directly with
Okay, I'm trying to establish a timeline here in my mind. Did that happen before, or was that predetermined? I guess that this was going to happen. The severance from the IFN group, then the shutdown of the program here, or the working concert?
they were around the same time. But I think the IFN probably happened after. But this was in the context of COVID-19.
I wasn't aware at council table that either that, that's the first I heard that we separate that and no letter even went out from anyone.
Yeah.
Question?
I do know, it was the intent of, Chief Dan to bypass IFN because Jordan's principal navigators basically became the IFN navigators. So by sending our applications to them, that was just another hurdle. The talk was to have our applications go right to the ISC for approval, bypassing the IFN navigators. But I never heard that there was a letter severing the ties to the group because they did provide a lot of support. It was just the government was taking too long to approve the applications. Our families were getting frustrated. Children weren't going without products. That's why the bridge funding was established. Chicken County set that $50,000 aside so that we could access it in emergency situations. So I don't know about severing.
Okay, well,
So I think it wasn't just like George's principal, there was many other cases that were involved in the name change. And I think, Chief, you're probably aware of long enough in politics that the IFN sometimes was housed the coordinator of different First Nations. And so as a collective of 13 First Nations, we shared HR duties. So one time, I believe Walt was the IFN coordinator. So the IFN coordinator of any duties, just like anything else, would have to come to the table and they would have their annual general meetings to be approved of their recommendations of positions or funding and other things. And most of the funding we got were very small, little chunks, tiny part, morsels of funding. But that being said, there had been HR issues in prior terms, and so as a collective, they would meet and deal with them, the chief or the admins. And so what happened was, when I think our disconnect started happening, was the current coordinator or what's the relations ministry or something with Aboriginal Affairs now, She's changed her name to, right, the IFN coordinator.
Oh, that's intergovernmental affairs.
There you go.
Okay.
So she changed her name, or changed to intergovernmental affairs, and that's when we started having a problem with that, the change in that, and then also talking about other things that even might encroach on our treaty rights and funding and our data. So that's when it became, I believe, a problem.
I recall when the IFN first started, it was just a loose political association between the larger First Nations that didn't have ties within the existing PTO description. And we just met, I guess, for common issues, I guess, whether it was Indian Act or some application that we want to program. But it seems that we fall to almost this tribal council type of arrangement where you want to house money and have positions and have programs being totally got the way against the grain, I guess, of the original intent of this group. And it seems like it's getting more employee driven as opposed to political driven.
So I had an email from Sharon Coyle. So the date was July 20th, so about a month after.
You want again? Yes.
And so the IFN's asking, do you have a plan in place? Now that we're no longer servicing you. And Sharon responds by saying, Tracy Grant, please putting the new team in place, which would be the no wrongdoing funded team, which was a very similar staffing structure, almost identical.
I think
That's
to me, the timing of that is a bit dubious, I guess, in terms of, you eliminate something to open the door for whatever you want, I guess, to describe as homespun, by eliminating the existing, children's principal program that we have.
And see, I think Gary Best, who is senior bureaucrat at IC Health, might have been advocating for that. I just see him talking on.
Well, it seems to be some motivation here, I guess, to accommodate it. So, going full circle, what do you want to do with children's principal? We heard the briefing note from, Marcia, and, from what I understand from her briefing note, she's looking at the reinstitution or reinstatement of our, what we had in terms of the children's principal program for this First Nation, and the reinstatement of certain positions to get that thing rolling again. Is that the way I understand it, Marcia? So that's where we're at, okay, Marcia?
Because there was funding under the No Wrong Door. I had a small part in that, that to make sure the two navigators and the coordinator would be, positions would be available. And that putting in Jordan's principal into that proposal was kind of the last thought. Okay, we'll budget all together. By doing that, it became, all that money became under the community wellness, I think the community wellness director's responsibility. But the way it was set up was a special initiative of council. And that's what we ran it. Our target was the families. I had a target of 300, we got 400. So there wasn't an opportunity to do an evaluation of the special initiative. It was just stopped. So I believe that the funding is within that No Wrong Door. I'm not sure that's what James and I have to talk about. How are those services going to continue?
Okay, can we table this then to have some internal discussion to sort this out there in terms of the crossover and the potential, I guess, use, I guess, of the money that's available for this No Wrong Door and the basically of that government principle. Can we agree to that?
So what I'd like to do, rather than install it, is move ahead and recruiting the coordinator and continue to have these discussions both internally and rather than going, whole
I think we will have our discussion first, and then we'll consider your suggestion. Agreed? Okay. Moving on. Note for the minutes that the council has agreed to engage in a discussion led by Marshall Sopron in terms of the rationale for the reinstatement of the Jordan's principle and the hiring on of staff to implement that program and to engage in discussions with James on the benefits or the crossover benefits of the NORA on NORA program. And to come up with some type of workable solution and report back. Let's make that a motion. Can I have a little, mover for that? Let's say, run out of time this year, for the first regular, council meeting in 2021.
Are you good with that, Marcia?
Pardon?
Are you good with that?
Yeah, I thought it would be, I thought it would be
Move to that effect, Keenan, second by Elaine, all those in favor? That's carried. Okay, moving on. We have, as I mentioned earlier, we have engaged, maybe you don't know, we have engaged Lucille Kibuyat to help facilitate with the council orientation. And that begins tomorrow morning at, I believe it's 9 o'clock. Or 10 o'clock, correction, 10 o'clock here at the council chamber. We're going to deal with orientation and the theme of nation building and review some of the key policies that the band has, some of the programs, some of our issues, and focus on, I guess, some of the key developments that we have to undertake, I guess, to accommodate nation building. And I was hoping that we have an agenda to circulate this evening, but we don't have that. The final, you'll get that tomorrow morning, and we'll review it, and I'll take it from there. Do you have it?
Oh, yeah, fine, the binders,
Okay. So the information is ready for tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock here, and we will proceed with that. And it's a 2-day commitment. So those that can make it, please make it for the 2 days. Moving on to 6.3 in Newton shareholders meeting. We'd like to delegate a chief or proxy for this to attend the shareholders meeting. You're pointing at Burton? Does he know you're kind of pointing at him?
He's ignoring.
I have no problem with that, it's a virtual meeting, so wherever I'm at, I can go virtual.
Okay. Virtually good.
Virtually. But I think you have to have a formal endorsement for that.
Now we're moving to the second to effect that Burton be our proxy for that. By Lyle, second by Elaine, all those in favor? That is carried. Moving on to,
Just a little bit more,
Yep.
Newton, if we could acknowledge John Adams as the president of Newton. He's a retired counselor from Moncton, but he is the actual president of Newton. He requested that we would endorse acknowledge his presidency on that board. So this council knows who the president is. It's not Lyle, it's not me, it's not one of the other two counselors from Moncton.
and what happens if we don't do this all?
Well, nothing will change. It's a courtesy, it's a request from him for transparency that we actually know if he's a retired counselor from Moncton and he's president of the technical first president was myself when we signed the documents and the meeting went to Graham Butcher. So we had a president from here for a number of years. And so it's a very simple process. So, not John is the guy.
Tyler?
You want us to endorse it, is it?
No, he just wants us to acknowledge that he's the president, so this table goes. Yeah, okay.
We're just saying, okay, cool.
Yeah. He wants to fail the law.
You must be pretty secure. He needs that assurance that really counts. Right? He's an Indian. Careful now, we're on a live stream. He's taking it up the side of the edge. My question is there a real necessity for this?
No, I could just report back at our next meeting that, yeah, you could really feel the love of that.
That'll be sufficient. How big would we be sending a signal?
I felt no disturbance in the force.
I'll let the force back.
So I think.
Maybe I'll let Ron address this. You shake your head. You have some question marks there?
No, I just, either way I'm good with it, I mean, but it's just, I don't recall having anything like that.
Yeah, it seems a bit petty, I guess, in terms of. Type of assurance.
It's out there, but I work.
You work good.
We're on the board the other day. Okay, I think we're good.
When you were president, did they acknowledge you?
Well, I was the actual official president to sign all the documents I got the corporation going. Me and Chris Plain. Each council endorsed the arrangement of the corporation, and so according to the terms of reference, each chief had to be the everything. And once we signed off, then the board was created and so on, that sort of thing. So, and that's what the shareholders meeting is. The only two people that vote at the shareholders meeting are the two chiefs. It'll be virtual this time, so it'll be, since you made the proxy, it'll be me, Chris Plain, just, we either agree or don't agree, it's just back over, according to the agenda.
Who brings the tie?
What's that?
Who brings the tie?
Good question, I guess our staff or the ties, I guess. Well, the ties, it's, they're, if it doesn't, if we don't approve it, just, basically, I have, the lawyer would have to determine, what the stalemate indicates, I guess, the corporate process.
Seems there should be a serious revisit of those bylaws, I guess. Bylaws to accommodate maybe two members from each First Nation. Full spread, I guess, on various issues.
Well, in terms of a tiebreaker, we're back to John Adams. That's why he wanted to do it.
Is this operation legal?
Oh, yeah. It generates for us about 130 million plus. So
I'm not going to question your revenue. I'm questioning my work structure.
yeah, I think it is. I don't find any problems from the onset that there's any illegality in the process.
As long as you all agree. A motion to acknowledge, what's his name again?
John Adams.
Didn't he write the Constitution or something?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
Second for that motion, to acknowledge John Adams as the
President of the
grand poobah of these grand.
It's getting better all the time.
President of Kiwanis Company. Second? Second, all in favor? Are there any abstentions? Any objections? I see none, carried.
Really was hoping it was unanimous.
Why didn't you ask for consensus then? Yeah. Okay.
So these asked me to address the next item.
Fees? All right.
So this is in response to the briefing note from November 10th. We were asked to bring a budget forward for $10,000. There's 3,500 for contingencies, in discussions with the group. We weren't quite sure what the full 10,000 would be, but we're still working on the process. Right now, it looks like we'll be using a number of buildings, churches, and be using roasters in several buildings to try to mitigate COVID-19. And then we would be, the working council, would be working with the original volunteers to purchase takeout supplies, and it would be a drive-through model. So that's what we're arranging, but they want to move forward on purchasing food supplies right away, so it's a.
Mover to approve it?
Yeah, that's true. I have a question. I'm not, we're not supposed to be cooking food in different places during COVID.
And I thought there was supposed to be a consultation with Kyla to make sure that we were complying with the necessary health regulations to make this happen. What happened to that?
And as far as I know, they are, I was talking to them about purchasing it. So this stemmed from John, because I would need to go to them and request 10,000. I think the original bid was $4,000 request.
You're not answering my question.
Yes.
Is Kyla leading the health concerns on this? I know where the money's coming from.
Right.
Johnny is clear of this. The health questions, are we
I'll
complying with the COVID regulations set by employer?
So I'll make sure that we are. When I was discussing this with Lee, the proposal that the volunteers were talking about wasn't set in stone. So we were still looking at other options.
So I recall the concern of council was that we wanted to make sure it's voiced in by the community that we're complying, I guess, with the necessary health regulations to ensure that we're not spreading some mass contamination in view of COVID-19. I think that's your concern, right?
Right, correct. Yeah, because that's what we heard the last time, that they can't, send a turkey over there and go in the ham over here. It's not supposed to be done like that this year because of COVID, but.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So
If you recall that I think we had a discussion at the arena and Kyle was present. That's when it was flagged, I thought.
So this is going to be a different model than usual. But again, I think they're still working on it.
Keenan?
Just point of clarification, from my awareness, is there not a caterer involved on this now?
If there is, it was brought to my attention.
Okay, well, I'll have to double check with Kyla.
So I can make sure, what this process would do is I would still have to approve the expenditures of the go out. So I can make sure, I talk to Kyle, and make sure we review the work before we move forward.
I guess it's satisfying Elaine and others concerned, I guess, about this. Can we make the conditional approval that it complies with the necessary health regulations in view of COVID-19? Can I have a move to that effect?
I have a question.
Yes.
I know there's probably, if we comply with all the safety regulations, health regulations, whatever, it's going to be a takeout and a drive-through. But can we treat our elders with some respect here and maybe have theirs delivered to their homes? I think there's a real, I don't know if it's not about delivering the Christmas checks to the elders, but I know they appreciated that. They felt that they were important. And a lot of people don't have vehicles. So I'm not sure if you're going to be feeding out a lot of people because they're not going to be able to have a vehicle to drive through. Unless we utilize the, fleet that we have out here, the vans and things.
We got some nice black, vans out there that accommodate some seniors.
Yeah.
So we can encompass all those considerations, I guess, in terms of priority for the seniors, I guess, in terms of home delivery of the we received piecemeal as, including the need, I guess, in terms of, don't have transportation, identify them as priorities for consideration. And also Elaine's concern, and others' concern about the compliance with COVID-19 health regulations. Elaine?
James, can you work with Dan and find out if there's, the elders that they usually deliver to, just to make sure that you're accommodating the same, that they know who they usually deliver to?
I can do that. I'll take a look at his list as well as the listing of the checks.
Because you don't want to miss anything.
What if somebody calls from California? Okay, good. Understood.
That's group.
Refresh our memories, was that true? We didn't call for
There's
a
no
vote.
motion.
Just a motion?
No, there is no motion.
Okay, can I have a mover and seconder? Moved by Cody, seconder, please. With regards to the approval of the budget plus the conditions in terms of the priority deliveries for the seniors and the needy.
And
the
compliance with COVID-19.
Second by Marcia, all those in favor? That is carried, okay? The feast is on. What's the age, starting age for seniors?
If you're a senior, you know.
Okay.
No political thing said in this paper.
Bring to it. Director's report, update on homeless strategy.
Okay, so this is more of an update. So I met with the Anglican Church Board twice and apologized. I think the date is off. The December 5th is wrong. It was actually a week prior to that. And then I met with them again on Monday in person. They met at the church with some stakeholders. And this is with regards to making the necessary renovations to the BYF. The stakeholders included Chastity representing Algonquin, ECC, health, community services. And so the church wanted to be very cautious in terms of their reputation, neighbors, their liability. So ultimately, they did decide to go ahead with the use for a shelter, understanding we would be looking at a model of staffing that's 24/7. So we'll be moving forward on the renovation piece and putting the staffing and training in. So this is really more of an update, so that you know that was approved by the board, and very cautious. And they want to give it a go.
The other part of this homeless strategy, we've also got Tom Wise working on some renovation costs to a possible site, pending costs, I guess, and suitability to a property on Austin Road that was formerly owned by Bill Sands. It's that steel Quonset hut, I guess for the sake of identification. Isaiah Kitnosway now owns that property. And he approached me and offered it, I guess, as a possible site for shelter. I went and reviewed or took a look at the structure. It's insulated and it has water there. It does need some renovations and quite possibly a source of heat, and depends on who you locate there, probably the guys, I think. And we're having Tom establish some cost to renovate that to make it suitable for a shelter, I guess, for quite possibly the guys, I guess, to locate there. So that's a possibility there. We'll look at the costs when they arrive, and we have to thank Isaiah for coming forward and offering that piece of property there. We'll see where this leads. And we also have some contingencies under consideration, I guess, in terms of we don't have some structures or seats or beds rather available for the homeless. So we have some sites identified. James, you want to elaborate on those? You had mentioned that we could possibly use the arena.
Yeah.
I can jog your memory here a bit,
Yeah.
everybody.
Yeah, thank you. We
Oh,
don't
but
have
it was
renovation.
not long there.
She's calling that.
We can possibly use the arena, particularly during the holiday shutdown. When they're in operation, it's a challenge with the arena if they're early booking. So their 7 a.m. bookings in particular could be problematic, which is why we looked at the Levi in the first place.
And you had also mentioned that emergency cases, that even the band officer was offered as a temporary shelter for guts severely cold and nobody had anywhere to go, that it would be cost available here for them to spend the night to accommodate that way. So that we were trying our best to get everybody off the street. It's really, really cold and it's starting to get that way now.
We do have a shovel-ready solution with the officer and another building. In case of that.
That leads me to another point, I guess, it's not in order here. I guess, what are we doing, I guess, in terms of the rapid housing initiative that's being offered by ISC? And is there any maneuverability for us to secure some one-bedroom houses or whatever to accommodate the homeless?
So what we're looking at with the rapid housing, and so they have a mandate to provide funding, and the goal is to have the housing filled in less than a year. So they have a preferred provider. It has to be modular units. So I provided an attachment under rapid housing, so you can get an idea of the site that was proposed formerly. And I apologize, it doesn't look like the photo here. But what they are is they're triplex buildings. They're attractive looking buildings on the outside. And what we could potentially do is have 4 of them serviced. And so we would have essentially 4 triplex units, so 12 units in short order. And we would be able to meet a number of needs that way.
And the supplier is
It is
that oil?
oil.
John?
The pictures are there.
The pictures are there? Yeah.
It's under our
Oh,
HI.
perfect. Yeah, so the pictures are page 3 under our. You can see they're nice looking buildings. And so we have a surveyor here tomorrow. So what we would propose to do is survey that lot, it's not all that.
Yep.
And I think we're just gonna survey one lot because they would be owned by the man and put in a road allowance.
I guess to set aside the key critical point at this point is getting our application in by December 31st.
Right.
Yep. So we're trying to get this in fast forward to accommodate that deadline. No further questions, let's move on, James.
Okay, so COVID action plan, I'll just say briefly, we do have the draft documents provided by Kyla. So what she'll do is she'll be reaching out to the working group for the COVID action plan, and we'll schedule a meeting to go over the draft documents. But I looked at them and we're in good shape.
And just a reminder too, to the security group that we identified at the arena. We need some work done there, I guess, in terms of doing some necessary preparatory work for any types of checkpoint at the bridge there, as well as to identify how we're going to recruit that and do all that necessary groundwork to be ready just in case something, we're faced with a lockdown situation and we need a key checkpoint, I guess, on the first part of the year. I think that the COVID situation is going to get a little worse before it gets better around here. And it's going to take time before we get the vaccine available to our people. Pardon me?
First Nation.
I think we're identified the fourth on the list of priorities or something. Okay, continue on.
So census is the letter, the Census Bureau asked me to table.
Okay, well, I'd like to.
I was taking perfect.
We 8.5 update on hot clubs, go ahead.
Okay. So we have completed most of the demolition. There's a little more work that we could do on the southernmost island, it used to be a dog kennel, in terms of cleaning that island up. And workers want to continue to work. We can try to cast the net wider as we discussed and hire other people that are interested in working there. And so what I'm asking to, in order to continue the work, because the weather's very mild, is to increase the project budget by $15,000. That's going to be partially off, well, the $15,000 will be entirely offset by a donation of $25,000 from Enbridge that's going towards this project. So there's going to be a net gain of $10,000 with the donation. So that's what I'm asking you to approve the budget.
So I have a mover and second to accommodate that, to increase the budget, moved by Keenan, second by Burton, all those in favor. That is carried. Moving on to, we already got the rapid housing. Yeah, okay.
Any clear conflict on that last one, I guess.
Financial report.
Yeah, so this is just an amendment for you to approve and providing dollars for COVID-19 related renovations. So this is going to cover the renovations to the band office, and I'm discussing what we can do with the other programs that are identified here, daycare and the firewall.
Mover and second for that recommendation. Moved by Marcia, second by Ron, all those in favor. That is carried.
Do they have casino now? Have to pull that up, but what this is, right now we have our internal process that we use to make recommendations to the finance committee. So we've just brought that here in terms of our internal standards for groceries and Casino-Rama. So I'm just asking for approval of payments for the Casino-Rama request and grocery.
Question?
I don't have it.
I don't have it either.
I don't need to.
It's on there, but like, it's listed, but there's no attachment.
It's a in-camera item because there's names listed in there, so you'll need to sign in to iCompass.
I don't know.
Thing I-
I did, so I did.
Yep, I am signed in.
The link is in there.
I'll forward the, email where it's attached.
And you said it's an in-camera, right?
Yeah, I don't see it on my computer. It was not even everybody's one.
Tell me, is it time sensitive?
There would be people with requests that have to wait, so they're talking registration.
Okay, can we just deal with the full amount and have it administered? What's the full amount?
Should have that calculated.
Alright, so it's, for the health category, it's $9,711.10, and for the bursary amount, it's $11,000.
Is that the only two? Did somebody total that up? What's the total?
Under the health category, it's $9,000.
What is the bottom line? My goodness.
You do have to separate it. So you have to.
Well, I understand that. I want the bottom line for approval to administer. Okay? What's the bottom line?
$20,711.10.
Can I have approval for that disbursement? Moved by, Burton, second by Keenan. All those in favor? Carried. That will be administered by administration. That's it for our agenda. Can I have, Ron?
Just, part of the directors is, I asked, and I believe somebody else asked about the road being repaired. And it's getting back where that individual is, and family, up along the road. Being the private roadway, I think, or you guys did. So anyways, I was just wondering if there's any progress, and, you know, we need to get some gravel or something back there to create that road, make it better, because it's not being done.
I actually came up with a solution with Scott. It's gonna be hard to identify this emotion right now. Does it need, can I bring it back to the next council? We're here tomorrow and,
Yeah, can you, let's slow it in some. Motion to adjourn. to tomorrow morning. Moved by Lane, second by Ron, all those in favor. Okay, we'll see you here, we'll see you tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock here.
Just remember, you won't see me.
You're right
Okay,